Let's talk about living in Spanish Fork, Utah. The good, the bad, the ugly. 10 or 15 years ago when we lived in Orem and thought we were in the big city, we always used to kind of make fun of Spanish Fork, and we'd say you have to own a pickup truck and you got to be part of the rodeo. And honestly, I feel a little bad about that now because we live down here now and absolutely love it. But there are some quirky things that you're gonna want to know. There are some cons along with all of the good. So let's jump in. Right off the bat, like so many cities in Utah that are along the Wasatch Bench of mountains, I've got to talk about the outdoor recreation and the scenic beauty. I absolutely love Spanish Fork Canyon and the hiking trails and snowmobiling in the winter and camping in the summer and the hot springs that you can hike up to. In town, there's a beautiful Spanish Fork River Trail that I think runs for 7 or 8 miles. There's lots of outdoor recreation, sports parks and fields. You're just a couple minutes east of Utah Lake. You're a couple minutes west of all of the mountain ranges and things that you can do there. Look it up on any map like All Trails and you will see some amazing hiking trails and things in the area. So absolutely a beautiful place. You sit down in the city and you've got these majestic mountains up to the east, and you turn around and look down to the west and you've got beautiful Utah Lake and fields and farms. And so it is really a beautiful place to live with a lot of outdoor things that you can do. Spanish Fork is also an extremely friendly place to live. There's an annual rodeo that's just a huge production. They also have free rodeos that you don't even need tickets for, and tons of other community events. I mean, if you look on the Spanish Fork website, there is always something going on, big celebrations and lots to do and see. But of everything that's going on, the Fiesta Days Rodeo is probably the biggest, and you'll want to get tickets early for events that are happening in that. There's a demolition derby, there's the rodeo, there's all kinds of hands-on experiences that they do. But that's not the only thing that happens here. In the wintertime, you have the Spanish Fork Lights, and people drive from hours away, well, maybe an hour away, to drive through a huge park of Christmas lights and light displays around the Christmas holiday. They have movies in the park when the weather is warm. Again, when the weather is warm on Friday nights, they have all kinds of food trucks lined up around the main city park. They have what they call the Wings and Wheels, which is like an air show and a car show that's really, really cool. They have children's markets. They have all kinds of community sporting events. I mean, there is just a lot going on in Spanish Fork. Let's also go over some of the statistical elements of Spanish Fork. If you look at AARP's livability index, Spanish Fork is kind of mid on most things. However, the health score is actually a 71. Now, just so you can put that in perspective, the highest ranked overall city in the country ranked a 73. So on the health aspect of Spanish Fork, they ranked a 71, which is incredibly high, and that factors in a lot of components, but it's just to get a perspective on it, it's kind of general overall healthfulness of people living here. There's great access to medical. There's a big new medical complex that was built right off of Highway 6 where you can get a lot of different treatments. There's some specialty treatments as well around in the area, and honestly, for the pros and cons side of things, I would put medical in a good category, probably a pro. If you need really specialized treatment like cardio, neurology, cancer treatment, you're probably going to be going up north just a little bit. But for all of your general run-of-the-mill, orthopedics and physical therapy and primary care and pediatric care and all of those types of things, Spanish Fork is incredible. And AARP agrees. I mean, they're ranked one of the highest rankings you can get on the health score. Now, I would put this in kind of a mid category, not necessarily a pro, not necessarily a con. If you need specialty treatment, it's probably going to be on the con side. If you don't need specific specialty treatment, definitely medical and access to medical and overall health is a big pro of the Spanish Fork area. Now, moving on to schools and education. if you look at greatschools.org, Spanish Fork is kind of mid, maybe a little bit above average. I think there's one school that ranks a 9 out of 10. I think there's one that ranks an 8 out of 10. And then there's a bunch of 7s and 6s, which 7s and 6s aren't bad. They're just not like, oh, I want to live here because of the schools. I mean, you go up into places like American Fork and Eagle Mountain, you get a lot of really high scores. But in my opinion, so I have children that go to the Nebo School District, and that's the school district where Spanish Fork sits. Basically, it's all the way from Springville down to Santaquin. And I absolutely love the schools. Now, there are a lot of older buildings. It's been around for a while, and so some of the scores are relating to that. However, with all of the recent development, residential growth, Payson High School is being completely redone. That construction is almost finished. Spanish Fork High School is being completely redone. We have Maple Mountain, which is a very new school. We have Salem Hills High School is a pretty new school. There's lots of new middle schools and junior high schools. So generally speaking, as school districts grow and more residents move into the school district and they start getting new schools, typically the great schools rankings will also go up. But I want to tell you what I really like a lot about the Nebo School District and the Spanish Fork schools in particular. They have incredible teachers, incredible administration. Anytime you have a question or a comment or a concern, or you need, one of our students needs help with, such and such assignment or learning, everybody has been so willing to jump in and help out and just make sure that students are succeeding. There's a very modern feel to their mental health and wellness programs. I mean, we came here from Alpine School District, which is the Orem and American Fork, Lehigh, Eagle Mountain, all of that northern Utah County. And they were good as well. Great teachers, great people. They care about health, but in the Nebo School District, there's really a great focus on positive psychology and mental health and well-being. In fact, some of my kids, as one of their science classes, have a mental well-being class, which is just an incredible offering. So I personally really like the Nebo School District and the Spanish Fork schools. Great schools, the scores haven't caught up yet, but from what I've personally experienced here, I think the schools and their scores are going to come up very quickly from a little bit above average to excellent. I think we'll see over the next couple of years. And still on that topic of education, so I've talked about secondary, elementary education, things like that. There's not a big university here. There are smaller places. There's some great vocational schools, like M-Tech is building a huge campus here. They have a smaller one, but they're going to be building a really big one right on the border of Spanish Fork and Salem. There's not big universities. I mean, you're probably, depending on where you're at in Spanish Fork, you're probably 20 minutes, a little less than 20 minutes to BYU, probably around 20 minutes to UVU. So you're within 20-25 minutes of some major graduate level education, university education, and those are excellent schools, but there's nothing right in Spanish Fork. So if you're looking for a place to live close to a major university, you might want to go a little bit further north if you're okay with extra traffic and things like that. It'll be a balance that you'll want to weigh. All right, let's talk about crime rates, because sometimes you get into smaller towns and crime rates seem to eke up above the national averages. So as far as property crime and things, I think the national average is a score somewhere around 35. I believe that's out of 1,000 residents. There will be that many incidents. Spanish Fork is lower than that. They're down in the low 20s, I believe, at the last report that I saw. As far as violent crime goes, the national average for violent crime is 4 per 1,000. Spanish Fork is actually 0.91. So that is tremendous. Utah's average is well under the national average, down in the 2s. A lot of Utah County cities get down right around 1. I've seen one that was at like a 0.98. Spanish Fork is a 0.91, so a very peaceful place to live as far as crime reports go. So let me just kind of wrap up a lot of the pros that I've talked about. Spanish Fork is a very tight-knit community. There's really a sense of belonging community here because of all the great community things that happen. So that's really a pro for me. And there's just a great quality of life. Lots of things to do. I love outdoor activities. Spanish Fork has a lot of growth. We're going to talk about that in the con section, but they're getting a brand new rec center that will be done in about a year and a half from now. And then I've talked about all the trails and things like that. There's tons of shopping, lots of new commercial development happening, Costco's, Walmart's, tons of little restaurants. There's not, and we'll talk about this on the con as well, there's not really great dining here. There's good dining, but we'll get to that in a minute. Overall, I absolutely love Spanish Fork. Let's talk about some of the cons and some of the kind of mid things that I'm finding here. And I want to start with job opportunities and economic outlook. So if you look just statistically at Spanish Fork, the economic outlook is tremendous. It's great. It's excellent. That's kind of because Utah County in general has a tremendous economic outlook. There's not a whole bunch of high-paying tech medical type jobs in Spanish Fork. Now that's changing. I mean, we have the big medical center right off of Highway 6 and I-15. That brings medical jobs to the area, but there's not a lot of the medical research and cancer and cutting edge type medical jobs. There's not the big tech centers like what you see up in Lehigh and Silicon Slopes. So there is great economic opportunity here if you're looking to live right where you work, within like 5 minutes or where you could jog to work. Spanish Fork may not be the place for you. But if you're wanting to get away from the hustle and bustle of the city, if you're wanting to live in just a beautiful suburban type setting and be within 20 to 25 minutes of major economic centers, Spanish Fork can be excellent for you. So I put the economic opportunity in the mid category, even though everywhere else you read is going to put it as a pro and as excellent economic opportunities. It's not right in Spanish Fork that you'll find those opportunities. It's in surrounding areas and specifically up to the north in Utah County. Okay, here's another thing that a lot of people are listing as a pro. I kind of list it as a mid, and that's housing prices. So in Spanish Fork, in general, you can get a nicer home, a bigger home with a bigger yard and newer finishes for about the same price as what you would pay for a home up in North Utah County. So in general, you're getting more for your money in Spanish Fork, or if you want to scale down, if you're looking at a home that's about the same size, about the same condition, it probably will cost a little bit less in Spanish Fork. However, the medium price in Spanish Fork for a home is still $500,000. Now up in North Utah County, it's like $525,000. So that's not bad. I mean, that's a 5% difference in housing costs. So a lot of people say, oh, this is a pro of living in Spanish Fork. And I guess that's true. If you're going to live in Utah County or Salt Lake County for that matter, Spanish Fork is less expensive in the housing side. But from a nationwide perspective, if you're considering, should I move to Raleigh, North Carolina or Utah County, probably our housing costs are going to be a little bit higher than what you would expect in many other places. We're slightly above the national average overall for costs. For housing, we're about 15 to 16% above the national average because of all of the economic opportunities that are here and the quality of life that is here. All right, let's talk about public transportation and getting to and from places, commuting in general. So really, once you get down south in Utah County past probably Orem, there's really only one major thoroughfare that's running north-south is kind of how all the cities run through Utah County, and that's I-15. It's a major freeway, 6 lanes, HOV lanes, big freeway. As you get down into Spanish Fork, there's a lot of lanes and traffic generally flows pretty well. But really, that's it. You know, if there's a wreck on I-15, if you're driving in rush hour, there will be some traffic delays. Now, it's not as bad as like an LA or San Francisco areas. You know, you're not sitting for an hour and a half in what otherwise could be a 30-minute commute, but it may add 5, 10, 15 minutes onto your commute depending on what's happened with the traffic. And really, because there's just that one corridor, you know, so you get this long freeway stretch and then major roads that come off running east-west, and those can get backed up a little bit as well. And you'll see sometimes, especially, you know, 5:30, 5:45, as people are getting off from work up north and coming down south, traffic will be heavy but will flow well, and then you'll see long backups on the off ramps of I-15. So you'll want to kind of account for that. If you can avoid driving rush hour, avoid it. I mean, that's not anything super new. That's kind of anywhere you are. You don't love driving in rush hour traffic. One thing I would recommend if you're commuting during rush hour times up and down that I-15 corridor would be to take advantage of the HOV lanes. You can buy a pass, it's not that expensive, and you can actually pop in and out and you only pay for segments that you use. It's an auto tracking system. And you know, if you spend a couple bucks a week, you know, avoiding a 2-mile stretch of thicker traffic, that could be a really good thing and could save you a lot of time. The HOV lanes end just right around Spanish Fork, and so you're not, you know, if you're going south of Spanish Fork, you know, you may or may not want to, but especially if you're working up in Silicon Slopes and coming down, or working Salt Lake or Provo and coming down, you really might want to take advantage of that. So traffic, I think it's actually pretty good. I would put that as a pro. Let's talk about public transportation. There's really nothing down in Spanish Fork. There are some buses that move around. Most of those buses are geared to get you into the UTA hub that's up in the Provo area, and to get you up to the Front Runner, which is a light rail track up in the Provo area. You're not really going to get around super well in Spanish Fork on buses. It's kind of a commuter type of a thing. So public transportation, if that's a big deal to you, I'd probably look and consider some other cities, you know, especially if you're commuting all the way up to Salt Lake or something. You might want to look at Front Runner in Provo and not have to drive through that. But that's kind of you know, that's kind of normal in a lot of Utah County cities. There's really not very many places that are walkable. Maybe downtown Provo, possibly Lehigh, Utah, in Utah County would be considered walkable, but for the most part, public transportation, specifically in Spanish Fork, I would list that as a con if that's a big deal to you. Okay, let's talk about a couple of commute times as long as we're here. With good traffic and no delays, you can get from Spanish Fork to the Salt Lake International Airport in about 52 minutes is what Google says. From my experience, you're probably a little less than an hour, so that's pretty close. If you're flying somewhere that you can use the Provo airport, I would highly recommend that. There's actually another commercial carrier that's coming now, so we'll have 2 flying in and out of the Provo airport. I mean, the last time I flew out of there was 1 gate, there were 2 TSA people, there was only 1 waiting area. It was phenomenal. It was one of the best flying experiences I've had. So if you can fly out of Provo, I would recommend that. And from Spanish Fork to the Provo airport terminal is like 15 minutes, which is excellent. If you're commuting up to Silicon Slopes and the big tech industry that's up there, with good traffic, you're about 27, 28 minutes to get up to there. To get to the major universities, UVU's about 15 minutes, BYU's probably about 16 or 17 minutes. So great commute times into the universities. Same thing with Provo, by the way. If you're commuting up to the Provo-Orem area for work, you're probably 15 to 16, 17 minutes, depending on where you're trying to get. So not bad commute times, and you get out into this rural, suburban feeling area. Let's talk about a couple of cons that really you're going to find in most Utah cities, but I just want to mention them in case this is your first look at Spanish Fork and what to expect in this area. We have some very seasonal weather extremes. There will be days every year where we get dumped on with a big winter storm, and for some reason it typically seems to happen right in the early morning, and so commute times can be difficult, as they're clearing and plowing roads and things like that. But Utah's good at dealing with that. They get all the roads plowed off and cleared off and salted and things pretty quickly, but you will see delays with extreme weather events. Sometimes in the spring we can get really strong winds. Spanish Fork, where there's lots of open fields and things still, it's not fully developed out. Sometimes the wind can be a little bit stronger here than other areas. I mean, honestly, there should be a clue as you're looking up at the mountains and you see these big, huge wind turbines right at the mouth of the canyon. That's probably a good indication that we get a lot of wind. In the summertime, it can get hot. I think they say generally 5 to 6 days in the summer where we will hit triple digits. But for the most part, summer temperatures are going to be in the 90s. Spring and fall are absolutely beautiful. You will get cold snaps in the spring in Utah. That's not just Spanish Fork, that's anywhere. I mean, you'll have a nice day that's in the 60s outside and it's sunny and you're super excited for spring to be here, to get out and enjoy some of these outdoor areas. And then the next day there's snow and wind and hail, and then 3 days later it's sunny again. And so there will be extreme weather shifts in Spanish Fork. And then you'll also have some air quality issues. Every winter we will have a handful of days that are bad air days. We get these low pressure fronts that come over and just kind of trap all this valley air down in, and with all the commuting and driving in factories and agriculture, we'll get some air days that are unhealthy air. EPA, the last report that I read, said that we expect somewhere between 5 to 7 bad air days a year. It can feel like more than that just because sometimes in the winter it just feels smoggy until a storm comes in and blows that air out. So if you suffer from respiratory issues, you may want to consider some of the surrounding valleys around Utah County. Call me and talk to me about that. We also have some springtime allergies and hay fever, and there's lots of farming that's still going on here, and all of the mountains and trees and things. We can get a lot of tree pollen, we can get a lot of grass pollen, so you'll want to be ready to deal with that if you're moving really anywhere in Utah County. Thanks for tuning in and watching the whole video. I hope you find this useful. If you're looking and considering a move into Utah County, like and subscribe. I make videos like this for people like you so that you can get to know what it's really like, a candid look at living in Utah County.